Welcome, patrons. The surprise animated show that was announced earlier last year is finally out, so let's talk about all 6 episodes that launched this past December. I have a lot of feelings on this, particularly the ending, so this is going to be long, and I'm kind of not sorry for it, so let's begin. Dragon Age Absolution, Episode 1, A Woman Unseen. We open up to a bunch of nobodies trying and failing to climb into a circle tower in Navarra. 2 of our heroes, Roland and Miriam, are watching from afar, talking about the job. They need to steal a case of lyrium. Roland is scoffing at the plan their employer Dolph gave them and asks what Miriam's actually going to do. She then says that she has bribed the washerwoman for some mage robes and then shoots the rope their co-workers are trying to climb, letting them fall and gather the Templar's attention while they sneak inside to steal the goods. After the opening, we cut to Miriam and Roland getting yelled at by Dolph, who is upset that they got his nephew arrested. He is interrupted by Fairbanks, who you may remember as a minor side character in Inquisition, and more importantly, Saphira, or Hira for short, who is immediately shown that her and Miriam have history. She walks directly to Miriam, calling her Miri, and notes that she kept the scarf she gave her. Hira tries to hold her hand and hug her, but Miriam backs away, still upset with how Hira left things. But Hira insists, apologizes, and asks her not to fight in front of everyone. Fairbanks then interrupts and says that they were the ones to actually hire Dolph and his gang for the job, and then he turns to Miriam and Roland and says that the lyrium job was a test. They passed, and he wants to hire them for another job. Dolph is upset, saying that he was the one hired, not those 2, but Fairbanks tells the group that, maybe they should leave because he already tipped the city guard as to who stole the lyrium, and gives a sly wink. Dolph staggers and attacks the group in a fun little sequence where Miriam is the only one to actually fight, telling the others to stand down. And if you notice, she does her best to not kill anyone. She then takes down the largest man and tells him that this isn't worth dying for, as his children need him. He relents, and the others leave, with Dolph being ignored in his pleas to kill them. Later, outside of whatever city they're in, but it's likely Cumberland, it's never actually confirmed, but Hira and Miriam start to argue for a bit, letting us get a sense of what happened between them. They were obviously in a relationship, but Hira wanted to join the Inquisition to save the world. Miriam, however, didn't want to go, so Hira left anyway. The 2 argue, and Hira basically tells Miriam that she needs to do this one job for the Inquisition, and then they can settle down and make cheese in the hinterlands together. And here we meet the rest of the team. Along with our current lineup, we meet Quidian, who is introduced as a rebel mage and healer, but herself explains that her passion is explosions and elemental magic, and she isn't that rebellious. The other new member is Lachlan, a Lord of Fortune. And here we get the quest. The Inquisition learn that Tevinter Chantry has an artifact called the Circulum Infinitus. While they don't know what it does, Fairbank quotes Cassandra.
It does not matter. All you need to know is that it is an extremely dangerous artifact fueled by blood magic, and I, for one, cannot recall any good coming from something powered by murder.
Their job is to steal the artifact and take it to Orlais. Right now, they have tracked it to an old summer palace belonging to the Tevinter Divine in a city called Nessum, and it's currently being studied by a magister named Razarin Amasine. Miriam reacts strongly to this, and while Hira is silent, Fairbanks pleads with her, saying that she's the only one who has been in the building and knows how to get in, and they need to do it fast. But she refuses and then turns away. Hira goes after her then, and Miriam breaks down crying, saying that she promised herself she would never go back there, and here Hira is asking her to do that. Hira continues to plead with Miriam, saying that she doesn't have to go in to show them a way in, and she wants this adventure to help her heal from her trauma by confronting her past so they can be together. They kiss, and off they go. We get a montage of the group traveling to Tevinter, and we get our first look at Nessum. The group is able to get inside with Fairbanks weaving a small lie and then having to pay 5 gold just to let Miriam in, fearing she could cause trouble with the other slaves. We then get a fun montage of the group planning the heist and a voiceover of Miriam explaining a bit of the history of the place. While there is a cathedral to Andraste prominent in the city, it's also sitting on top of a sealed temple to the old gods. Fairbanks is able to secure a comfy estate for the group as a hideout. We plan to wait till the afternoon church service to strike, with Hira and Quidian sealing the doors so no one can escape while they work. Eventually, the group is in a tavern, and Miriam happens to have accidentally taken the seat of a magister who thinks Miriam is a runaway slave. Fairbanks tries to settle things diplomatically, but when that doesn't work, a bar fight breaks out. After a few good shots, the group had paid a barkeep a hefty amount of coin to not tell the guards, and they are bragging about their fight back at the hideout. Miriam is upset, however, yelling at the group about how they risked their mission and storms off. When Hira comes to check on Miriam, Miriam changes the subject, saying that she found a way into the castle. It's her. Hira says she doesn't have to do this, but Miriam insists, saying that she really wants to settle down with her. The next morning, the group gets ready, and Miriam wipes off her makeup, revealing that she has a slave marking on her face. She sneaks into the castle ground, goes right up to the front door of the palace, with the mark letting her inside easily. She makes her way to the cellar, kills the guards that are playing cards inside, and lets the others in from the secret entrance. Episode 2, The Will of the Maker. We open up to Magister Rizarin Amasine and Knight Commander Tassia below in what is known as the Vault. Rizarin is preparing for a ritual to find out more about the Circulum, with his plan being to summon a spirit for information. Tassia questions why he even wants to know, as it's fueled by blood magic and so the Divine would never allow its use. Rizarin shoots back that that's exactly why he wants to know, because perhaps he can learn how to modify the magic and be able to use it safely. All they know is that the artifact can bring the dead back to life, just as they were before, so isn't that something to learn about? Tassia finally agrees to help, and so Rizarin summons a spirit of wisdom who calls himself Memory. Memory tells him that it has witnessed everything that has happened in this place, and seems shocked and perhaps a little upset to see the Circulum again. It tells Rizarin that the Circulum was the last and greatest work of Magister Amelia Pavas, but it was never actually used. It asks if Rizarin intends to use it, and warns that nothing goes against the nature of dying without consequences. It then also gives another warning, that if the Circulum goes to another that seeks it, all of Tevinter will burn. Tassia asks who that person is, but Memory is strained, saying that revealing that would be unwise. Rizarin demands an answer from the spirit, using magic to force an answer, and Memory transforms into a pride demon. I actually think he calls himself Enmity in his demon state, actually, so we're going to call it Enmity. While it can't break out of the summoning circle, Enmity summons other shades, and one is able to free the demon. It then goes to control the Circulum, and while it does grab it, Tassia distracts it while Rizarin builds another summoning circle to send it back into the Fade. He returns the artifact, and Tassia wants it destroyed if it is indeed a threat to Tevinter. He begins to say that he won't let anyone take it away from him, even her, but she interrupts him, saying that she can't risk losing him, and caresses his face. The bell for the evening chant then rings, so it's time for them to go. Rizarin places a protective barrier around the artifact, and Tassia notes that the ancient defenses in the castle are absolutely insane, and bugs Rizarin again to get them chained so that a common thief won't get the entire city killed. We cut to our group of common thieves hearing the second bell for the evening chant. Fairbanks tells the group that there are 4 bells in total, and they should aim to be out of there before the service ends. Roland is disguised as a guard, with his goal getting as many other guards as he can out of the throne room, so Fairbanks can open the vault and Lachlan can protect him. Meanwhile, Hira and Quidian seal the chantry door so that no one can get out while they work, but they are interrupted. Miriam, on the other hand, is to protect their way out. We see Miriam cleaning up the bodies of the guards she killed and is interrupted by a little elven girl who is hiding from the cook. The girl knows she's there and begs her not to tell the cook where she is. Miriam then gets a flashback to her own childhood, where her and who we learn later is her twin brother, and you'll never guess who the human boy is, are playing. She accidentally lets the human boy fall, and while he's fine and even laughs, she's slapped hard by the mother, her owner. We cut to Tassia talking to Rizarin's personal bodyguard, Neb. You will also never guess who Neb is. Now, she's worried that Rizarin could be tempted to do something dangerous involving the Circulum, or even something wrong, which, okay, girl, if you think he could do something wrong, why do you even like this guy? But whatever. Anyway, they are interrupted when Rizarin walks out of the chantry. He says he would rather go take a walk than attend the service, telling Neb to go back to the apartments. Tassia says that she will join him on a walk, and he kind of sounds disappointed, but continues. Hira and Quidian then pop out from behind the pillar and attempt to finish their work. We cut to Miriam talking to the little girl, which prompts more bad memories of her life in slavery. The little girl begs for Miriam to help her hide so she won't be beaten, but Miriam refuses. Hiding isn't going to stop her from being beaten. The drunk cook then barges in, and Miriam tells her that she's the only one there. Talking to the cook again brings back some more memories of her master, and she's backed into a blood-stained barrel. To hide the bodies of those she killed, she rats out the kid, who is dragged out by her hair, screaming at Miriam. Jumping back to Lachlan and Fairbanks, the second patrol has caught Roland, and Lachlan joins to help him fight. Fairbanks also finally opens the door, and Hira has joined him to grab the artifact. Inside, Hira opens the barrier to grab the artifact, and when she does, Fairbanks stabs her in the back. Miriam, meanwhile, has had enough and leaves the cellar and accidentally finds Rizarin and Tassia having a moment. She suddenly has another flashback to her covered in blood with, hey, it's Rizarin holding the body of her dead brother. His own mother dead not too far away. Tassia reprimands Rizarin for wanting to go back and fiddle with the Circulum some more, saying that he is obsessed with it. But he says she's right and then kisses her while Miriam awaits in the shadows. Hira and Fairbanks fight some more, but as he's running away, Hira punches stones through his chest. In an attempt to stop Fairbanks from running away, she activates the castle's defenses, letting demons free to roam around. Cutting to Tassia, she is rightly freaked out because the system is designed to kill everyone that isn't in a Magister apartment. Miriam, who is still nearby, is then worried about Hira, who rushes to find her. Now, this is the part where Quidian is going to be running around from demons for a bit, and that's basically all that she's up to for most of this period of time, so this is mostly acted as comic relief, so we're just largely going to skip it. Hira takes a potion that helps her heal from her wounds, but she is trapped in a vault that now has a loose dragon. Miriam heads back to the escape route hoping to find her friends, but instead finds Fairbanks dying with the artifact in his hands. Lachlan and Roland then walk in to see her next to a dead Fairbanks. Episode 3, The Serpent's Coils. So we open up to a bit where Lachlan thinks Miriam killed Fairbanks, but this doesn't really go anywhere. It quickly resolves, so we're just going to skip it. Now, the main point of this, I think, is just to show that Roland is able to convince Lachlan with a promise of a bard song and a suave look to stay and find the others, and he also demands to hold the circulum for now. So, that's the thing. We cut to Tassia, who is notified that a good number of the guards are locked into the chantry, which lets her know that this isn't an accident. Her and Razarin fight a bit about him being locked in an apartment, and he finally relents. She tells Neb that no one is allowed out but her, and he flirts with her a bit before she leaves. While she did tell Razarin that she would secure the vault first, she immediately tells her guards otherwise, saying that she's not putting that thing above people's lives. We cut to our heroes then, who are fighting their way out through hordes of slave zombies. Then they head to the vault when Miriam finds Hira sulking by the opening, which is locked. She asks where Fairbanks is, but Miriam tells them to focus on getting her out. But she isn't able to find a way. Meanwhile, Razarin hates waiting and is talking to Neb about how it's stupid that he isn't helping, but Neb doesn't move. He sighs and says that he asked him to be the perfect soldier, so it's his fault he's stuck in here. Now back to our heroes. Roland and Lachlan do a little flirting while fighting, and Hira tells Miriam that she's never going to be freed, and instead gives her a new mission. Take the circulum to Kirkwall, to a bar called the Hanged Man. Miriam is confused as Fairbanks said the Inquisition agent was in Orlais, but she pleads with Miriam, saying that she doesn't trust anyone else to complete the mission. Meanwhile, Tassia and her guards kick ass, and Quidian saves the slaves, and everyone hears a dragon. Razarin then uses magic to make Neb stand aside. Back to our heroes, we get a first look at our dragon, who breaks out. In an attempt to get her to leave her behind, Hira walks deeper into the vault, and Roland helps Miriam to get back to the escape route. On their way back, Quidian just manages to find the group by exploding through a wall, and they finally make it back to the escape room, but inside are Tevinter soldiers, with more flanking from the door. But Razarin stops the guards and is surprised to find Miriam, who he calls out by name, saying how great it is to see her. He tells her welcome home, calling her sister. Episode 4, Those Who Falsely Dream. We open up to Razarin trying to calm Miriam down, saying that no one is going to hurt her now that she's with her family, and with that she stabs him, saying he killed her family. Neb, his personal bodyguard, then throws her across the room, and our heroes then go to defend Miriam, but Razarin is able to keep up with all three and puts them into a crushing prison. Hey, do you remember that spell from Origins? There it is. Meanwhile, Neb is about to kill Miriam, but is stopped by a spell from Razarin, and she recognizes that Neb is actually just a dead body that's been reanimated. When she looks closely through the mask, she realizes that it's actually her twin brother. You would have never guessed. Razarin begs her not to unmask him, but she does so anyway, horrified by what she sees. She goes to attack Razarin again, but he is able to stop her, saying that he is just trying to fix her mistake, bringing him back to life. Miriam is able to break free, but Tassia walks in then, and the group makes a run for it. But Miriam is shot in the back, a bloodstain left behind. Our heroes then retreat. Tassia yells at Razarin about everything that is going on, but they are interrupted by a guard. They found Hira. Tassia orders her to a cell, and the other guards to focus on the dragon that is currently awake and chained up in the vault. When the others are gone, Tassia asks what thieves were, and Razarin feigns ignorance, but she rightly calls him bullshit. Miriam had his family crest tattooed on her face. She tells him that people died because he didn't tell her everything, and here we get the backstory. Miriam was his personal slave who was raised as his sister. His mother bought her to be his personal spy and assassin. To Razarin, she is the only family he has left. When Tassia asks why she was trying to kill him, and that there are rules on runaway slaves, he says that she's not actually a runaway slave. He let her go. He then scoops some of the blood that was left on the wall, saying that he can finally explain what happened to her so that they can be a family again. Tassia objects, saying that blood magic isn't the answer to this, but he rationalizes it, saying that he's not killing anyone. However, she doesn't like the idea, as it always starts with a few drops, but using blood magic always gets out of control. Rizarin begs her, but she stays firm on her stance and tells him if she finds any evidence of blood magic, she will report him to the Divine. On their way back, the entire city is on lockdown. Miriam is bleeding out, so Roland and Lachlan go to scout ahead to make sure the way is clear. The two talk, and Lachlan is convinced that Miriam is the real traitor, but Roland calmly points out that the story doesn't really make sense. Lachlan relents on Miriam being the traitor, but he is still convinced that there is something more to this mission that they know. He pulls out the circulum, saying that this might be the last chance to get out before they find out what's going on the hard way. Roland calls him a hypocrite then, as so far he's the only one he sees willing to screw over the group. Quidian and a still badly wounded Miriam interject then, and Miriam begs them not to leave just yet, as the city will kill them, and she just can't lose her best friend, Roland, too. Roland says that she won't lose him, and the group runs off. We jump back to Rizarin sealing off the dragon once again, and against Tassia's wishes, he begins the ritual to talk to Miriam. Back at the hideout, Quidian has the guys help take the air out of Miriam and heal her, but something is stopping her from being healed. She recognizes that someone is using blood magic to keep her under and stops her from working her magic. Lachlan then pushes her aside, pressing a cloth to Miriam's wound, saying that there is more than one way to stop bleeding. We are then in Miriam's dreams, and she's looking out over the horizon with Hira. The two share a kiss, and then Hira is stabbed by a rage demon disguised as Miriam, calling her a tool. She runs and falls into Rizarin's arms, saying that a woman like Hira doesn't deserve her tears. Miriam attacks him, but she is unable to land a hit. He says she's been hurt and he can save her, but she just needs to listen. He then shows her the past, saying that they were all trapped, but they had each other. He wants to bring Neb back with the circulum, but without her blood he won't be able to perform the ritual. Doesn't she want things how they were? Miriam is then able to show him her memories of his mother abusing her. He yells that he wasn't able to do anything for her then because he was a child, but she angrily brings up another memory, and here we get the most important flashback. During his harrowing, Rizarin straight up failed, being possessed with a demon. However, his mother refused to let him be possessed, and she ripped out the demon and placed it into Neb. Miriam then killed his mother to try and stop the process, but it was too late. Possessed Neb then attacks her, and she has to kill him too. In the present, Rizarin, watching the memory, says that he knows she had to kill both of them, and we see past Rizarin tell Miriam to run, while present Rizarin explains that he lied to the Templars about what happened, but he could do a better job at protecting her now, and he can fix her mistakes. He has become a stronger mage than his mother dared to dream of. He has risen through the ranks of the Tevinter Chantry, and he claims that he will be the next divine, and with Miriam's help, the three of them can bring Tevinter to be a better place for all, and that she will have purpose and everything she wants. But Miriam doesn't want that. Rizarin is confused, saying that he is promising her that she'll be safe and taken care of, but she still refuses. Rizarin's mask cracks then, and as he crumbles into a string of insults thrown at her, and I'm frankly I think I'm doing a bad job at explaining this part, because this is actually probably the best scene in the series, and this is a great example of an abuser being told no and just freaking out about it. He tells Miriam that Hira is in his custody, and if she doesn't bring him the circulum and she runs, Hira will die. He heals her wounds then, vows to show her how wrong she is in wanting to be free from him, and then he kicks her off the pillar they're standing on, waking her up. Time passes and Miriam is awake and feeling better thanks to Quidian's help. When she finally regains consciousness in full, she tells the others that Hira is alive and they're going to save her. Episode 5, An Altar of Fire. We open up to Rizarin talking to Neb's body while he heals its wounds, with him stating that they will finally be a family again. Meanwhile, Miriam is filling in the others about just what's going on in her backstory while we watch Hira being placed into custody. We learn that after Miriam ran, she ended up meeting Hira, who helped her and showed her what love could really look like. While Hira did leave for the Inquisition, Miriam refused to go with her because a deep connection like what she had with Hira was just too much, so she ran too. But she's not running anymore, and she has a plan to save Hira. Miriam then finally briefs them on the Fairbanks situation too, and Quidian's confused with that, as she worked with him for years and there was just no way he would turn like that. Lachlan and Roland also argue a bit on who to deliver the circulum to after all this is over, but Miriam throws it onto the table, saying that all she wants is to save Hira. If one of them wants to go get their money, then take it and go. But they all agree to save Hira. Back to Hira and Tassia, the Knight Commander questions Hira. Tassia tries to make a deal with her, saying that if they're able to get the artifact working, thousands of people could be restored. Maybe they could restore someone Hira wants. But Hira interjects, saying that thousands of Tevinters will be restored. Tassia is confused as Hira is Tevinter herself, which Hira is shocked that she somehow knows. And Tassia notes that her necklace has the crest of a family from the north. Hira snaps at Tassia, saying that the artifact is the last thing she needs to make sure all of Tevinter will burn, and Tassia recognizes her words from the spirit memory. Here we get Hira's backstory. She comes from a well-off noble family, but their trouble started when they wanted to help the people that are enslaved. The Venatori found the family burning her father on the front lawn as an example, and no one helped them. Tassia apologizes, but says that not everyone is for the Venatori, and that her and people like her are trying to free the Imperium from their influence. Hira mocks her, saying that she doesn't want to free Tevinter from the Venatori. She wants the entire place to burn, as all of it is corrupted. Rezarin interrupts then, and makes Tassia leave so he can talk to Hira. He immediately hurts her, telling her that was for thinking she could steal from him. He yells out that she told Miriam to run when she was stuck. Why would she do that? Hira yells back that she loves her, and Rezarin laughs. He tells her that Miriam is on the way with a circulum, and when she gets here, he's going to kill Hira. Hira shoots back that Miriam would never forgive him, but Rezarin questions that, saying that if she knew all of the details, he thinks she would. A guard interrupts them, saying that Miriam is outside, so Rezarin orders him to capture her and the circulum. We cut to the courtyard with the cloaked Miriam holding her hands up. When the gates open, Tassia and her guards await her. But before the action begins, we get Tassia talking to Neb again. She believes that the circulum has changed Rezarin and she's worried for him, and she hopes Neb is worried too. As Miriam walks in, Tassia questions where the others are, and we cut to Quidian creating an explosion. Tassia takes half the guards to investigate the explosion, while the other half is quickly slaughtered by Miriam and her cloak full of knives. She then takes on the possessed body of her brother. We cut to Rezarin and Hira hearing the explosion. He's wondering what's going on, and Hira says she's about to be rescued, as Miriam isn't afraid of him anymore. He's confused, saying that she's never had anything to be afraid of, and Hira laughs.
You think she trusts you? Rezarin Amasine? Are you really the last one to figure out that you're the villain?
Back to the rest of the group, Lachlan and Roland take on Tassia and her guards. Meanwhile, Miriam is fighting Neb's body, saying how much she loved her brother, and he could never be him. He reaches up a hand at her, then blasts her away using a spell given to him by Rezarin. Back to the boys, Lachlan and Roland take on Tassia, but when she gets the best of Roland, they yield. She demands answers, but realizes that Quidian is nowhere to be seen. We cut to her and find that she has exploded away into the vault. Miriam awakens then, being dragged along by Neb. The two struggle until finally he begins to choke her, but the stone beneath them starts to rumble. Quidian has freed the dragon. A rock smashes them apart, and Miriam grabs a sword, cutting the head off of her brother's body and releasing the demon that was inside. A mob of mostly slaves runs from the building, and Miriam notices the same girl from earlier being trampled, but she is able to save her. Yay. Episode 6. Price of Salvation. Hira awakens to all the chaos of a dragon destroying everything. She manages to free herself and makes a run for it. She runs past Lachlan and Roland, who call out to her, but she doesn't seem to hear. Miriam enters the palace looking for the others and ends up fighting Quidian, who tells a small story on how the dragon was thankful for her freeing it. The boys meet them then and tell them where Hira went, so they all leave. Tassia and her men go head-to-head with the dragon, and when it leaves, a mage lets her know that the magic holding the dragon in place has been destroyed, so there's no way to get it back into custody. We cut to Rezarin crying over Neb's beheaded body. He then heals Neb's body and using blood magic binds a demon back to it, vowing to take Miriam back. Now the same mage from the previous scene then interrupts, having seen the whole thing. Now to his credit, he just says that Tassia sent him and begs him to stop the dragon, and Rezarin laughs, saying that he just kind of forgot about the dragon, and then stabs the man in the neck, and then uses the mage and the bodies lying on the field to fuel his ritual to bind it. When it's finally bound, the guards cheer, but Tassia notices the messenger lying dead to Rezarin. She knows what happened. She's shocked and deeply upset, but continues on with her work on helping the wounded. Meanwhile, Hira is at the safe house, tearing it apart. She finally finds the circulum and makes a run for it, but runs into our heroes. Miriam grabs her in a big hug and then shuffles her inside to find it torn apart. Miriam then notices that Hira has the artifact in her bag. She tries to weave a lie, but the others aren't really buying it. Miriam asks her to hand it to her, but she doesn't, and the pieces start to fall into place. Fairbanks wasn't the traitor. Hira was. Stuck, Hira apologizes and runs. Quidian is able to stop her, and Miriam takes the artifact back and demands an explanation. Hira had joined the Inquisition to fight the Venatori, and when the breach had been taken care of, she thought they would march on the Venatori into Tevinter. But they didn't. They were never going to stand up to Tevinter because they didn't want to start a full-scale war. So she found someone braver, the Crimson Knight. The group plans to use Templars and even Northern ones to burn Tevinter to the ground, but they need the circulum to do it. However, she was afraid that just stealing it would trace it back to the Crimson Knight, so she volunteered to steal it for the Inquisition, and then arranged to be stolen, making a deal with Rosarin for Miriam. He would use it for a ritual, then Hira and Miriam would escape using the artifact after, and in return, he would stop the investigation into his disappearance. Miriam is deeply upset at the betrayal, but Hira pleads that he wouldn't have kept her. A dragon explodes onto them then, with Neb and Rosarin in tow. The others run in fear of the dragon, but Miriam pleads with him to stop, begging for the lives of her friends. Rosarin asks why he would barter for what's already his, but Miriam says that she will trade obedience for their lives. We cut to the others planning to save Miriam, and Quidian is confused on how the dragon is acting, but realizes that it's being controlled by blood magic. She has a plan. Lachlan grabs Roland into a kiss, and I know it's not really set up here, but it actually is in the show. I'm just doing a bad job explaining this. But Quidian looks a bit dumbfounded. Rosarin refuses to bargain, saying that their deaths will be her fault, and she screams as he starts the ritual. Rosarin needs more blood, so he stabs the dragon for more power. Only then does the circulum grow, creating a portal to the afterlife, I guess, and we see a spirit that looks like Neb come from within. Rosarin asks Neb to take his body, and the spirit emerges from the veil-like barrier to float towards the body. But Miriam begs him not to, that this life was terrible for them, and she wants better for him. The spirit smiles at his sister and tells her that everything will be okay and that he loves her. And then absolutely obliterates Neb's body. Then our group disrupts the ritual, causing an explosion that frees the dragon. Rosarin is angry, calling Miriam a selfish bitch, and before he can continue, Miriam finally kills him, saying that her and her brother were never his. The dragon raises behind her then, but Quidian approaches, healing the dragon. It's thankful and flies away for freedom after years of imprisonment. Miriam approaches Hira then. She begs Hira to take the circulum to the Inquisition, and for her to just say that she's more important than the artifact. Just then, the real Hira steps behind her, saying that she wishes she could, and everything goes white. Everyone wakes up alive, the artifact gone. Lachlan notes that Hira probably ran out of time before she can kill them all, but Roland says it's more likely that she just couldn't do it. Miriam takes off the scarf that Hira gave her, and says that she has to go after Hira and destroy it, and the others agree to go with her. We cut to Tassia crying over Rosarin's body, and girl, please, it's just not worth it. And then we are in Kirkwall, more specifically the Gallows. A Red Templar reads a message from Hira to the Crimson Knight that she has the artifact is being pursued, but she doesn't actually say who is after her.
Kill these agents and bring me the circulum.
Yes, Knight Commander.
I will have my war.
Discussion. So before I say anything, I do want to quickly admit any perceived biases here. I actually was lucky enough to get a press box from BioWare on the show. Now I actually wasn't expecting it, so opening the box to a Dragon Age logo was pretty shocking. Now inside was a cute scarf with Nugs eating cheese, which I'm going to read as like a nod to Miriam's scarf and Dreams of a Cheese Farm, and a gift card to Netflix and Uber Eats. I actually did try to film a little unboxing for it, but as I mentioned on Twitter, this also happened to arrive the day after some expensive car repairs, so I started to tear up a bit, and you can hear my voice, and oh man, the audio for this footage has just been mysteriously lost to time. How weird. Now, why mention this? Because some of you are going to assume that anything positive I have to say in the show is because of the box, which isn't the case, but I also don't want to hide the fact and give more ammo to the theory that BioWare bought me out. BioWare didn't buy me out with the box, but I am very grateful for it. Now, to expand more on the box, I'm obviously not the only one who got one. Another popular BioWare YouTuber, Ash, also received a box, as well as some other prominent streamers and personalities on Twitch and Twitter. Now, I don't actually have a full list, but looking at other boxes, from what I can tell, I think we all got the same thing. Here is like a nice scanned image of the card that came inside the box, and the sticker that was on top and sealing the envelope. Now, there's probably also questions as to how BioWare just so happened to have our addresses, and while I can't speak for everyone on the list, it's likely that they just obtained it from the EA Creators Network I somehow got onto a while back ago. Now, with that out of the way, I just can't not start off this thing without talking about Meredith. I have been sitting here trying to wrap my head around it all because I honestly don't know if I love it or hate it, and like I feel like when people say that, they're meh or something, but no, I genuinely mean I have two parts of me that both love and dislike this reveal, and I cannot choose between the two, and it's been like almost 2 months at this point. For the new fans in the back, though, let's talk about who this person is, because they don't even mention her by name in the show. And for people who watched in like another language dub or couldn't quite tell it was Meredith by voice alone, the end credits for that episode does confirm it, right down to the same English actress. The very last scene in the show shows a giant cluster of what is called red lyrium. What is that, you might ask? I'm so sorry, but that is a whole ordeal. I have a video on it. Please just go watch that, and if you don't have time, it's just like really bad. Very, very bad. And this one talks with a familiar voice for those who have played the second game in the series, Dragon Age 2. Knight Commander Meredith was leader of the Templar Order about 10 years or so before the show was set, depending on when the show was set, I guess. But she bought a mysterious idol that the player character found underground that we would later learn is made of red lyrium. She creates a sword out of the lyrium and becomes paranoid, a symptom of the red lyrium. She rules the mages she governs with an iron fist and becomes a tyrant, and you must stop her after a bunch of plot happens. At the end of the game, she tries to draw too much power out of the sword and becomes a statue of lyrium herself. Now, after the game in the novel Tevinter Nights, we learn that an agent of Fen'Harel... Oh boy, how do I even begin on Fen'Harel for people who just watched the show? Okay, it's Elven Loki is actually real and just showed up in Thedas. That misses a lot of nuance, but we're just going to go from there. Anyway, this agent brews a special potion, takes it to the statue of Meredith that sits where she was defeated, and then he pours it over her heart and is able to pull out the strange idol, again reformed and whole, and brings it to his master, sort of. There's actually a big story there, but it sort of happened that way, so we're just going to move on. Later in the last DLC for Inquisition, Beric, one of the Inquisitor's companion and the current leader of Kirkwall, where all this took place, tells the Inquisitor that they are finally able to get rid of the Meredith statue, and you can kind of find the game model floating around in the Black Emporium, which might be more Easter egg than lore at this point, but either way, the Meredith statue was taken from its resting place in Kirkwall. From here, we just assumed she was dead, and that was that. Her body was chipped away in pieces. But with the ending of the show, we hear her voice and see a brief shadow that looks like her head. It is, without a doubt, Knight Commander Meredith. So, as a veteran fan, why am I torn on this? Now, on one hand, if I had a nickel for every time a major boss that I fought in Dragon Age 2 came back to life later in the series, I would have 2 nickels when that's not a lot, but it is weird that it happened more than once. I guess I just liked Meredith's death a lot. Her life was ruined when her parents tried to hide her sister's magic, resulting in the death of her family and a lot of other people. She devoted her life to do better than her parents and ended up becoming so focused on her fanaticism with the Chantry, the thing that helped her deal with the loss of her family, that it ended up killing her. Her last breath is an ironic prayer for more power for her God's humble servant, followed by the coolest fucking scream in any video game I've played. It was so nicely tied up in a little bow, I kind of hate the idea that the show could mess with it. And then even worse, maybe they could actually stick the landing and make something really cool, but Netflix has a history of not granting a season 2, so now we're just stuck knowing that Meredith is trapped in a crystal and then have no resolution on that. Now, on the other hand, I just really like Meredith. She's evil, she does bad shit, but she is such a fun villain. I'm actually not a huge fan of Dragon Age 2 combat, but her boss fight might be my favorite in the entire series. And I honestly think a lot of her draw is just that her voice actress, Jean Gilpin, just fucking rocks. I love her. Just her delivery just knocks it out of the park every time. So even if the show doesn't stick the landing on this, I do just kind of like seeing more of Meredith and knowing that Jean is getting a paycheck out of it. That's just how I feel. Okay, so we talked about the who of the last scene, but I think we also need to talk about the why and the how. So how is Meredith back? Now, one of Blue Lyrium's main abilities is holding on to memories. The most concrete way to show this was actually in Dragon Age Origins with Shale. Now, Shale is a golem companion who, while she lost some of her memories, she is able to gain some of them back. We learned that she was a dwarven woman who volunteered to be made into a golem. Now, the process of making a golem is such. You take an armor or stone body, place a dwarf inside, and then pour molten hot lyrium into the body, melting the dwarf inside. There was also a ritual for the dwarf to be controlled with a control rod, but Shale's is broken and that's a bit of a story, so let's ignore that for now. But hundreds of years later, Shale is still herself because her memories are trapped inside the lyrium that was poured around her. Now, there are other examples of lyrium doing similar holding memory things, but this example is just kind of the closest to what Meredith likely is. However, this is blue lyrium. What about red? Now, we don't actually have as many examples of red lyrium holding memories, and I feel like the times we do, it's also attributed to the veil being torn and the spirits of the Fade rushing in to play out horrific memories, like in the Dragon Age 2 Haunted House. Red lyrium is just blighted lyrium, so how would the blight affect lyrium's memory holding properties? My guess would have been that the memory is twisted, holding on to memories of anger, as Cole describes red lyrium as being very angry. Now, Meredith was already turning into an angry, crazed version of herself, and how she talks in the show mirrors how she talks towards the end of the game. There's also a question of, is this actually Meredith or a bitter memory taking her identity to complete her will? And quite frankly, this is a huge question within this series itself, and I'm not going to be able to answer that. There are many times Dragon Age asks you if someone who has the memories, acts, and looks like a person is actually that person, and it's never told us how to think about that. And I imagine the show will do the same. Now, Dragon Age has danced around on what happens to souls of people in the universe, and even when Neb's soul seemingly comes from the beyond, there is still a question if it's actually him. I imagine something similar will happen to Meredith. Now on to the why. Why Meredith would want to do anything again is almost a no-brainer. For the new fans, Tevinter view magic as normal, while the rest of Thedas view it as dangerous and often outlaws it. Meredith's job as a Templar in southern Thedas was to capture mages, lock them up in a commune where they all lived, and learn how to safely use their magic as per their religious beliefs. Hundreds of years ago, Tevinter, who was ruled by mages, adopted the religion of the Chantry, but flipped off the southern version and made their own. Both sides now view the other as heretical. So Meredith, whose city was destroyed by magic, and her, but does she see that? No. Anyway, wants to take her issue with the mages right to the heart of the problem, the Chantry and country that stands against everything she stands for. Now, for those of you asking, has any crazy religious figures in the lore done this before? Yes, actually, a divine ages before any of the media is set tried to destroy Tevinter, but as the country is very powerful, it was just a long, bloody war where nothing good came out of it. Meredith is just trying to finish what her religion has started many times over. My main question, however, is how the main artifact in the show comes into play. The show describes and even demonstrates how it works. You can revive the dead as they once were. You seem to need the body intact for the spirit and even blood that is close enough, if not belonging to the departed themselves. And a fun little thing is that the dead can also have a say in the matter, which is a really great scene. I love it. Mwah. So what the hell does Meredith want with this? I guess that perhaps you might not need the exact body, and the soul of the dead could enter another body, so then Quest might be getting Meredith just a body again, and doesn't matter whose it is. But she seems to lead fine without it, and you can put souls into other bodies or even objects just fine in the lore. The problem is finding the soul after it's gone. But we know where Meredith is, or at the very least, Meredith thinks she knows where her soul is. I would be surprised if Meredith, the show, knows or cares that she is a bitter memory and is looking to complete herself. So unless this has a secret second option of creating a body if there is a soul or something close enough, I'm not sure what she really wants with it. But while I'm not sure, I do have a tinfoil theory on why she wants the artifact. I would believe she's trying to bring back Andraste to finish the holy march she started against Tevinter. She uses a volunteer host for the body, and she is able to track down the rumored descendants of Andraste that exist in Thedas for the blood needed. For the new fans asking who Andraste is, again, another long story that I have a video on, but basically it's Thedas' Jesus. Also, kisses for the writer who makes that either Liliana or Aveline as the daughter and descendants of Andraste. I like Aveline because Aveline, but hey, what if? My other question is, how does she plan to power the thing if it's known to be used for blood magic? Meredith was so anti-blood magic, and I can't imagine her powering this thing unless she has some sort of ideas about using red lyrium, which I honestly think could work. Lyrium and blood have very different abilities when powering magic, but blight magic, which red lyrium is blighted lyrium, is pretty similar to blood. It could get the job done, in my opinion. Okay, I've ranted about Meredith a lot, but I do have one more spiel before I'm done. Now, if this gets a season 2, which I do hope it does, I'm going to shoot my shot here. So the main writer of the show has a blog and mentioned that they watch Dragon Age lore YouTubers when writing the show, so on the off chance any of them see this, hi. So it's clear you all love the hell out of Dragon Age 2, and maybe this is already on your mind, but one of my favorite scenes with Meredith is when she briefly doubts herself mid-boss fight. She is so far fucking gone and out of her mind, and even then, there is still a little bit of who she once was peeking out and knowing this was all wrong. I would just kill for like a crystalline Meredith to take a look at the mirror and all the magic she has surrounded herself with and just take a moment to say, okay, actually, what am I doing and how is this right and just? And then just break down how she has twisted her own beliefs to justify the evil. No, I'm not a writer, I'm just a chucklefuck on YouTube, so what do I know? But like as a side note, if you need information and can't find it and can't be fucked with a deep dive into the lore, hey, just send me an email saying something like, I need info on X, and no questions asked, you'll get a big write-up from me. I want the tie-in media to be as coherent as possible with the main series, and I'm here to help. Okay, now onto everything else. Let's jump back to the very, very beginning of the show with the Circle Tower. Hey, why are there Circle Towers if this is at least happening late to post-Inquisition? Well, in short, that would be Vivian. While the circles are different in Southern Thedas now, they still exist. We don't know the exact rules of how the circle runs currently, but after the chaos of Corypheus, two mage groups rose up. The remains of the circle, who are loyal to the Chantry and their views on magic, led by Vivian, and the College of Enchanters, a more secular group of mages. Depending on your world state, one can be more powerful than the other, but a circle tower still running in Navarra, of all places, makes perfect sense, as that was the capital of the circle for ages. I kind of want to talk about Miriam and Hira's relationship. So right from episode 1, their very first interaction sets the tone of their relationship. It's not about what Miriam wants, it's about what Hira wants. I think the scene is incredibly well done because if you don't know what it's like to be in a bad relationship, this could easily fly over your head. Hira gives Miriam absolutely no respect and only apologizes when she isn't getting the reaction she wants, and then condemns her for making a scene in public despite Hira being the one to start this conversation to begin with.
Please, not here.
It's kind of a shitty hello. Let's also talk about Fairbanks. If you are unfamiliar with the character, he is an NPC from the Emerald Graves and Dragon Age Inquisition. He is the leader of a group of refugees fleeing from the Civil War and military separatists. A major quest later on in that area is helping a young woman named Clara who believes that he is actually a noble. The Inquisitor can indeed find evidence that Fairbanks was a child of a young noblewoman whose father killed her lover and disowned her when she became pregnant. His true name is... Évariste Lamarck, I think it's pronounced, but as he never really identified with the heritage that hurt his mother so much, he instead took the name of the place that took her in and cared for them, Fairbanks Cottage in the Dales. The Inquisitor has a few choices on if they want to give this information to Clara or Fairbanks himself, and the show doesn't really reveal what happens either way, other than showing that he preferred working in the field as an agent rather than at court. Fairbanks also mentions a wife at a few points, and while it's never mentioned in the series, I really want to believe it's Clara. She sort of has a thing for him in Inquisition, and I don't know, I just think they'd be cute together, or for whatever time they were together, as if, like, if they don't even get married until Inquisition has ended, and let's be generous and say at the end of 942 Dragon, they might have been together for, like, max 7 to 8 years, but it's probably closer to 2, if this is set around the time Inquisition dissolved like it seems to be. Which is very sad. Now, a fun little character moment that's kind of easy to miss, when right before Fairbanks punches the Magister in the bar, he takes his wedding ring off, gives it like a cute little smile, and places it on his dominant hand to use it as a weapon for the punch. And I'd like to think that his wife helped him pick out that ring for that purpose. I also just want to, talk about my sorrow at Fairbanks' death, because while I wasn't like a huge Fairbanks fanatic, and actually they did exist before the show was even announced, something about widows and widowers just sucker punches me, and I just get so sad, especially since I spent like most of the episodes thinking he was suddenly an asshole. I doubted to use Fairbanks, I'm sorry. When Miriam and Hira are talking outside the city of Navarra, Hira gives some important context to best place when the show takes place. She says that this job came from the Inquisition right before it broke up. This would make the bulk of the show set after the last DLC to the game Trespasser, and the years sometime after or during 944 Dragon. I would personally place the year closer to Trespasser, as I can't imagine that Hira would have taken almost 10 years to do this job before approaching Miriam. I've also seen some people upset that this seems to confirm that the show only allows for world states in which the Inquisitor chooses to disband the Inquisition, but that is not the case. See, the downside of the final choice of Inquisition is that I think the wording of the choice implies the wrong option. While there is definitely a choice to get rid of the Inquisition and only a very core part of the team stay on to fight Solus, the other choice still gets rid of the Inquisition, at least how you know it. See, the other choice attaches the remaining Inquisition to the Divine, and you basically become another Chantry police force. But it's not the Inquisition anymore, at least not by name. So either way, Hira is right, the Inquisition broke up. Now, quickly, let's talk on the Lords of Fortune. Right now, we actually have not a lot on this faction as it was first introduced in Tevinter Knights, but the gist is that it's an elite Ravanian guild of treasure hunters, meaning that Lachlan is not only good at his job, but also in it for the money, at least at the start of the series. That's honestly all we really have on the Lords of Fortune right now, but I'm sure we'll eventually get more of this group when the next game comes around. Now, I also want to quickly dispel a rumor I saw on Twitter. Now, the Summer Palace of the Tevinter Divine has absolutely no connection to the Winter Palace in Orlais that you visit in Inquisition. The idea of Summer and Winter Palaces are one of extreme wealth, and the only thing that the two have in common is that both the Tevinter Divine and the Orlesian Empress have more than one palace. The season name is just to denote when the person likes to go there. The rumor that I was seeing was that Tevinter hates the Southern Chantry so much they made a Summer Palace to complete with the Winter Palace and Inquisition, but while an interesting idea, that just isn't correct. Now, I just kind of want to point out the scene in episode 1 where they montage walk from Navarre to Tevinter. There's this overlay of a map that is actually just the exact same map you and I can find online, and I just kind of find it funny, honestly. I've used it a ton of times on this channel, and the resolution on this thing is absolutely bonkers, so I can see why they used it in the show. But yeah, if you wanted a better look at this full map of Thedas, I'll link it in the description. It's really easy to find. Now, probably the most major complaint I've heard about the show is, how is a Canary walking around a Tevinter city? I can understand why people are confused, and I kind of am too a bit, but I think we have to keep in mind that this is a very short season to hopefully get people watching so season 2 can start off and be a little bit longer. This is kind of how Netflix animation works, apparently. I don't really watch Netflix, but this is what I've been told. This is sort of a pilot series and things need to be streamlined, so an explanation on how she's walking around would probably just be too much time, especially since Quidion's not that major of a character. But at least here is my explanation and how I understand it. So when she goes into the shop, she mentions that she's buying stuff for her master, making her cover that she is a slave. Further, when she's running around the building, she's clearly using magic and carries a staff. Any mage under the Qun is bound as a Cerebos. If she was of the Qun, she would not be running around free as she is. When the group is undercover, she is a slave, and when they're in full thieves mode, it's very clear that she's just happens to be a Canary and not of the Qun. But I do want to point out something that was a bit of a for me. So when the group is trying to get into the city, Fairbanks mentions that he and the others are religious pilgrim for Charistes, whatever it is. Now, we don't know when the show actually takes place, but sometime before 945 Dragon, the Canary actually sacked Charistes, whatever it is. So knowing this, it's just kind of an odd choice to bring a Canary from a place that was just sacked by the Canary and not make it obvious that she is not only a mage that they own and not a spy from the Qun. Again, maybe this just hasn't happened yet on the show, but if we ever get a solid date, that's just something to think on. Now, expanding on Fairbanks' lie a bit, he talks about a pilgrimage of divine Adnias. We have so little on Tevinter Divine, so this is actually the first we've ever heard of this guy, but it's nice to get some expanded lore on the Tevinter Chantry, even if it's just a throwaway line. Further, he calls the group their servants, not slaves. Perhaps this is supposed to show how Fairbanks doesn't joke around with the idea of slavery, but if you're trying to sneak into the city, I feel like that's not the best choice. Then again, we don't know how magisters talk about their slaves. Perhaps servants is just an adequate exchangeable term. Also, while a guy with a very thick Orlesian accent is worshipping the Tevinter Chantry, I have questions. I guess why bring all this up? When Fairbanks hands the guard money, he doesn't hand them the expected 5 gold for Miriam's bond in the city, but rather 1 gold coin. I kind of think this was a bribe because along with Quidion's outbursts, and depending on the time frame of when this happened, this might have just been a bribe to get in because it was a weak story to begin with. Oh, let's also talk about the money, because this is probably the first time I've seen Thedas gold actually look like something of the concept art, and it's so close to a deep lore cut, but also so far away. So looking at it, it's basically a version of what is shown to be a Tesserae coin from World of Thedas Volume 2. Now, Tesserae coins are basically fancy tickets in Tevinter, and there are a lot of coin collectors in Thedas that value them. However, they are not currency. While there could be an argument this is actually a ticket into the city, why not present this in the first place? Now, I feel like the whole conversation would have been changed if he just had a ticket and then needed to explain why they were there. It would also sort of make sense that this... And, I don't know, it would make sense that the city that holds the Divine Summer Palace would have a ticketed entry. So, It's so close to being a really interesting deep lore cut, but I just don't think that was the intent, and I'm kind of a little sad. Like, I'm glad they're using resources to make things look coherent, and I think it does show that those behind the show, like, give a damn. And at the end of the day, who the fuck cares about a shot of a coin? But, you know, this is where my mind goes. Now, later on, when there is a shot of a bag of coins, the design is slightly different, almost holding on to the theory that this was a Tesserae coin. But again, I just feel like having a ticket into the city would have looked different than the interaction we got, but whatever. When Miriam is talking about Nessim holding a sealed temple to the gods, it shows a symbol of a dragon. While we don't know who that particular symbol is for, and it's never directly said in the show, when Fairbanks finally unlocks a door, we get this nice little mural. The after looks a lot like the strange figure we keep seeing over and over again in the Dragon Age Dreadwolf marketing. Now, I believe this is both Razakale and Gillenon. Why? That's a long series of videos that I'm not even going to ramble on. But if it is, this isn't the first time we have seen those two and Andraste linked. Remember in the Inquisition DLC, Draws of Hakon, the Inquisitor Emeridin worships Andraste and Gillenon as both were mortal women raised up to godhood, and does so while setting up his shrine in an old temple of Razakale. Here, Tevinter has seemed to take in the Temple of Razakale and built it into a major temple for Andraste. On the bar fight, I'm kind of a little confused why Fairbanks just didn't continue with the lie that Miriam was his servant. Like, he could have just said, oh, hey, she's with me, I'll move her seat, and that would have been the end of the interaction. The scene itself sort of felt forced to me so that there could be, like, some more action when I think the time could have just been better used expanding on some character scenes, but maybe that's just me. Also, why is no one using magic at a bar fight? I've also seen some people confused as to why Miriam was so upset afterwards. Now, personally, I think it's because while the others got to beat up a few magisters and feel like heroes for a bit, Miriam was harassed and threatened to be assaulted by a man who would have had the right to, given the laws and power imbalances in Tevinter. And it wasn't long ago that this would have been her fate, and it is the fate of so many like her every day in this city. I think that Miriam felt like the others weren't taking it seriously. And that being said, she makes a 180 in the very next scene where she's suddenly thankful for them saving her. I mean, like, I guess you should be thankful, but, like, she has these very valid feelings, and then she just kind of gives it up. Maybe that's like a Hira. I don't know. Let's talk about Miriam and Neb's tattoos. Now, to answer the most burning question I've seen, no, this isn't like super common practice that we know of in Tevinter. Slaves tend to be traded a bit in the Imperium, so marking for a certain family would have to mean they intend to keep them for life, which was the intent for Miriam and Neb. However, isn't the first time for slave markings in the world of Dragon Age, as seen in both Fenris and the Dalish. The Dalish is a long story, but in Inquisition we found out that the markings, or Valisleen, that they thought were to honor the gods, were instead markings to denote which god they belonged to. They were slave markings. Now, Fenris, who is a companion in Dragon Age 2, was also marked by tattoos made of lyrium. Fenris makes a lot of comments on how he was an oddity, although perhaps he meant that his markings were special compared to others. Now, there's also a theory that Fenris's markings were the original version of the Valisleen, and the Dalish used like a very dumbed down version of what their descendants had to endure, and like that's also linked to Razakale and Gillenon, but like that's over there. Either way, my point is that while it might end up being a commonplace practice in Dragon Age Dreadwolf, as of right now, it's like pretty rare to mark your slaves in Tevinter. Not unheard of, but like it's not super common. So here is betrayal. While I didn't personally see it coming when I first watched, I did see reactions of people who did see it coming from very early on. There are some hints to this, as when Rezarin talks to Miriam in the dream, and while you think he's just kind of being an asshole, he is kind of right. Miriam shouldn't cry over Hira. Hira doesn't deserve her tears. Now, he's still an asshole for not telling Miriam the truth then and there, and instead holding that over her head for the most opportune moment to get what he wants. And like also setting up the deal to begin with, but you know. Hira's declaration of love for Miriam and asking Rezarin if he is the last to know he's the villain also kind of becomes ironic, because her last act on that show is proving to Miriam that she doesn't truly love her and that she is actually also a villain. So, Rezarin's harrowing. First, yes, mages in Tevinter still go through harrowings and even have circles. They just look more like colleges and boarding schools than prisons where you couldn't leave. Dorian himself actually talks about his harrowing in Inquisition. But what bothered me the most in probably this entire show is how Neb was possessed, because it either borders on confusing or a missed opportunity for character building for Neb and the horrors of slavery. One of the biggest laws of magic that has yet to be broken in the series, one that has major lore implications that it hinges on, is that possession needs to be consented to. You need to let the spirit in. Now, keep in mind this consent can and has been able to be hidden, and the blight particularly makes this extremely fuzzy area, but as there was no blight involved in this moment, I'm going to just skip even touching on that. But Rezarin's mother is able to rip out the demon from her son and shove it into Neb. This should not have been possible unless during this spell his mother was able to beat down Neb's will and force him to say yes. Honestly, I kind of hope that's the case, because that would have been a really great opportunity to show how Neb suffered from abuse too, or perhaps how he loved his sister if Rezarin's mother threatened her life in some way. I guess I just wish we could have seen a little more in-depth explanation on the harrowing scene, because I think it could have really added to Neb's character. Now, since we're on the subject of rituals, let's talk about the ritual for the circulum. This is another thing I'm on the fence on, as while I did really love the scene, it was touching, and honestly, Neb turning away from Rezarin was really funny to me. I don't know, something about Rezarin learning that everyone he loves sort of hates him just brought me some joy. But yeah, I'm on the fence because while I love the scene, Dragon Age has been so hush-hush on the afterlife that there is a legit question on if there is an afterlife. But this ritual seems to softly confirm that there is. Now, I do think there is a ton of wiggle room to say that the spirit of Neb was not actually his real soul, but a creation of the memories held within the blood of his actual body and Miriam's and even Rezarin's. So this is where a season 2 would be great, so that we can kind of explore what the circulum actually does and what exactly Memory meant when he said that going against death would have consequences. But for now, I think there are equal arguments on who Neb's spirit was, and if it was actually his soul coming back from wherever Thedas' spirits are in the Fade, or a new spirit creation coming from across the Veil. Okay, let's just touch on some odds and ends I've seen about the show. Now, Rezarin's mother is never technically named in the show, and the credit she is listed as Enrichetta, which is a name. When Gwydion is saving the elves, there is an elven man with a mustache. Now, elves don't actually have beards in this series, however, this isn't the first time we have seen an elf with a beard in the extended media. The first time being the live-action Dragon Age Redemption. There's also banter with Solus where he seems to be joking about elves not being able to grow beards, so long story short, best case, elven men can rarely grow some facial hair. Worst case, someone forgot to tell some of the artists about this during the making of it. This has happened 1,000 times. It's going to happen 1,000 more. I guess I'm not angry at it. Now, if you didn't catch it, the person who created the circulum was named Amelia Pavis, obviously being related to our dear Dorian. Now, we don't know how far back the connection goes, but as this thing was never used, I wonder why Amelia would work so hard to create this thing and then never get to use it. Something that you would only catch if you played the games, but a lot of the sound design in the show borrows sounds from the series, particularly with magic. Gwydion has the most obvious example, as her powers sounding a lot like the non-player character Canary mages from Inquisition. There are a lot of other examples, but hey, sound design people, really nice job. I personally love the Easter eggs. Hey, let's talk on some brief season 2 theories, if we ever get one. When Tessie and Rezarin are first introduced, we get this interaction.
It is supposed to bring the dead back to life, Tassia, just as they were before. Maker's breath, don't you think that's worth investigating? Isn't there someone you'd give anything to get back?
And given that Tassia did have obvious feelings for Rezarin and seems upset at his death, I do wonder if she's going to be after the artifact to bring him back to life. Now, to be clear, I absolutely don't want this to happen. Tassia deserves better. I want her to immediately stand up from crying over his body and realize that she dodged a bullet. I want her to make a show of looking for the heroes to say that she's doing her job and then not give a fuck, and find some other hopefully nice chantry dude to fall for, all the while realizing that slavery sucks. That's what I want for season 2, but I also don't think that's what's going to happen. I also seen some people hoping that Miriam and Gwydion get together, and I guess I just didn't feel that vibe. Honestly, either Miriam gets with a new character or the series just lets her earn her happiness on her own. Now, if we're going to Kirkwall, and I'm going to play matchmaker for a second, I would like to make the argument that Shrade and Orana are currently single and ready to mingle. And look, Orana has aged 5 to 6 years since we first met her, and her and Miriam could really bond over the shared trauma of slavery and Tevinter. I'm just going to leave that there with you all. Either way, I just don't want Hira and Miriam to get back together, because I think Miri deserves better. If Hira was to get anything close to a happy ending, it should be that she knows that she messed up and gives Miriam a proper apology. And finally, what do I think this has to do with Dragon Age Dreadwolf? In short, I think at best we get a codex entry referencing the events of the show, especially if there's no season 2. I honestly think this show is designed to be a side story with almost no connection to the game series as a whole. Now, if I could draw your attention to the most recent comic series that debuted its first issue, not that long ago, Dragon Age The Missing, there has been very clear language that this is a tie-in to the main game. It's a lead-in to Dragon Age Dreadwolf. We have gotten none of that language for the show. And more so, at this point, it's a question if there will be a season 2. We don't know. They don't know. Nobody knows. Why would they set up an important plot that needs to be resolved before the next game when they don't even know if they'll get to resolve it? From a production standpoint, it just doesn't make sense to have the two connected at all. Further, a lot of the language and setting in the show make it seem like this is kind of set closer to the end of Trespasser, while so far the best dates we have gotten in connection to Dragon Age Dreadwolf have made it 10 years after the DLC. That is plenty of time for Miriam and company to have stopped the Crimson Knight and then for Varric to not even mention it in the most recent comic book. So, while I have no secret knowledge on if anything is going to show up and be important in Dragon Age Dreadwolf, I would put a ton of money down that what is in the Netflix show stays in the Netflix show. And that, dear patrons, is all that we know on Dragon Age Absolution. I'd like to know what you all thought of the show and what you think our chances are for a season 2, so comment below what you thought. Do you have lingering questions, proof that I'm wrong, comments about your own fan theory? Feel free to tweet me at Echodathon on Twitter or send a PM to user Gillanon on Reddit. De rest, you're all.